welcome everyone to the Lead Generation World Podcast. My name is Michael Faree. I've got Michael Hammond with me from NexLevel Advisors. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we were just sort of chatting about these, crazy times. And I know it's the hot topic of everybody's conversation. But when we think about mortgage companies, what's you're sort of on the ground floor talking with a lot of these companies. How are they sort of handling this whole issue?
Well, I think they have a couple of major challenges. First and foremost, a lot of people can talk about having a remote workforce,
Yeah.
but very few companies have had to go completely remote, meaning leadership is remote. They're not in the same office. So I think last week was really a bridge week of people just trying to get all of the tech working, getting people acclimated to working from home, like you and I were discussing. People who have younger kids, you now got to be a teacher, you now have kids at home. So even though we've worked from home for a number of years, it's different because you have different people in the home, you have different things. So I think first and foremost, the companies are trying to deal with, how do I give all the tools to my people remotely? Two, because information is changing so very quickly, they're having to deal with regulations. They're having to deal with what can we do. They had a lot of loans in their pipeline. From a lead perspective, they had a ton of leads because it was historically some of the lowest mortgage interest rates in the history of interest rates.
Yeah.
And then this whole virus hits. So they're now trying to figure out, well, what can I close? Is the county recorder open or not open? Can I get an appraiser who's going to go into the house and do an appraisal or not do an appraisal because they're scared and they only want to do a drive-by, and will the government allow it? So there's a lot of regulatory, there's a lot of just getting people working first and foremost that they've been dealing with. And those are kind of some of the top priorities.
Yeah. I didn't even think about, the just appraisals, let alone appraisals. And I did see something in the news the other day that, was it Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac? One of them adjusted their regulation or guidelines to just do drive-bys basically outside. They don't have to go inside the house. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, so production's obviously slowed down for these mortgage guys.
Production has slowed down. And then, realtors, they're not doing open houses. How many people are looking for a house? And then you have the issues of, if they're looking for a house, do they still have a job? The unemployment rates came out today, and what would it skyrocket to over 3 million or something along there. So we're hitting all uncharted territory. There's not a playbook. There's not a, hey, let's look at this. So I think communication is critical. And as we talk about what are some of the technologies, and I'm sure we'll get into lead gen and some of that, being very transparent and communicating and getting that communication out very quickly, very effectively is going to be critical as everyone's trying to navigate these constantly changing times.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of, technology with regards to the mortgage process, obviously I'm not it's been years that I've been directly involved in the mortgage industry, but I see the front end sales portion of it. People have lead management systems, point of sales, all these sort of things. But when I think about remote, I think about the struggle of processing and the back end that really becomes a major problem that's probably not so integrated with tech to make it easier. Am I wrong? Where are things at from a FinTech standpoint on the back end of the process?
So on the back end, there was a lot of conferences before all of this hit, and everyone was talking about, there's been a lot of talk on the front end in the last 2 or 3 years. Point of sale, marketing, the CRM, and we can come back to a little bit of that if we need to. But in most of these conferences, what people were saying is, how do I improve steps once we now are starting to work with the borrower, the underwriting?
Yeah.
And where technology was going before all of this hit was, what technology can you use that is going to create a more frictionless process? What are the manual processes right now in the mortgage space that you could almost eliminate or use technology to automate, and then really get to more of what I would call an exception-based process? You still need high-quality individuals, but instead of doing the mundane, rudimentary items, They're now focusing on the exceptions and addressing those. That all sounded great in theory. There was a lot of momentum at the beginning of the year for that, and then this hits.
Yeah.
So you have people that are in a distributed workforce. You've got to have the automation and the technology in place so that they can access the files. You know, one of the impediments is, can more than one person access a file at the same time? And what fields can they change and what fields can't they change? And what is the true record and system of record and file? And what are the other ones that people shouldn't be working on? Who has the right to change at what time? All of those little things that impact the process are all going to impede how quickly people can close on a loan. And they're working to get a lot of the loans through because they had that big pipeline, because rates are changing, because of all of that taking place. They really have to have those processes pinned down. So underwriting is a great example of it. Settlement services is another example of where people on the back end are saying, can I find automation and can I find a provider who's going to track down all those closing documents? I don't have time to call the title to make sure that they're still doing title work and that their office is still open and essential. I don't have time to switch appraisers because the appraiser I typically work with doesn't do drive-bys. So if you can use technology and technology providers and vendors that supply those type of services, very, very popular right now.
Yeah.
E-recordings, e-notarization, all of that is really where a lot of the technology is driving and trying to improve the process in a remote environment.
So are there specific platforms that you see that are making, those integrations and that are, good options for mortgage companies to be looking at?
There are, I don't know if you want me to name some different
Yeah,
vendors
please.
or
Yeah, no, I think
not.
it's, if you don't mind, I think people, that may not know would love to hear what these, what companies they should be potentially looking at. And certainly, we'll get into NexLevel Advisors here in just a second, but I'd love to, name names if you don't mind.
I don't mind naming names. I run a podcast too, and I
Yeah.
talk to a lot of lenders and I talk to a lot of vendors out there. We're talking about valuation models. First Close is a provider that works with credit unions, works with mortgage companies, works with banks, and they really automate the whole settlement services back end.
Yeah.
So that's critical. I've worked with a number of people at Capsalon, who's now an Ellie Mae company. And they have a lot of wonderful tools to streamline the underwriting process. Work with other companies like a Terra Verde, who really can go in and identify profit intelligence so that now they can say, even if you're in a distributed workforce, what are the most profitable loans? What loans should we be writing? What loans shouldn't we be writing? What type of loans for what region of the country? And so as this whole virus takes over and different parts and demographics of the country are being impacted, if you could have a heat map that would analyze what loans are really selling well in what area,
Yeah.
what loan officers are most productive. So those are a couple right off the top of my head. I
Yeah.
mean, we could go through a
Oh
laundry
yeah, I'm
list of
sure.
vendors.
And yeah, and I mean, my next question is, what happens with FinTech Overload, right? I mean, you've got platform after platform after platform after platform stacked on top of stacks, and it's like, at what point is, how much is too much? Is
So
there
I
ever a point?
think, yeah, people were getting a little burned out at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
And I would call that kind of the shiny object syndrome.
yeah,
It's great
yeah,
to have all of this cool stuff, but one of the questions I always ask lenders is, what's one of the most important things if you're going to talk to a potential new vendor? What's one of the most important things? And they said it has to easily integrate with my current tech stack or don't waste my time. I don't care how cool it is. I don't care that it can do these other things. If it doesn't seamlessly fit into my current tech stack, it's a waste of time.
yeah,
Now, what's been happening since the virus hit, and I've been talking to some additional lenders to add on to that point, is they said, what we're now going to do is we're going to fast track technology that can have an immediate impact on our operations. So I think, core banking systems, I think loan origination systems, servicing platforms, those big, huge platforms, people are going to take more of a wait and see. They're going to deal with the status quo and they're going to wait a little. They're not going to rip out a whole system. But if somebody can say, We can help you with drive-by valuations, and within 2 days, within a week, within 2 weeks, we can have you up and running because it's a SaaS-based model. I think those are going to get fast-tracked, and how lenders make those decisions are going to be radically different than they were 2 months ago and 6 months ago.
Yeah, because it's a good point you bring up, unintentionally, I think maybe, but is, there's certain companies that can, in this time, in what we're dealing with right now, are willing to fast track different things that are going to make an efficient process even more efficient. And then there's probably some companies that are completely frozen, right? Not knowing what to do, wait and see mode. Let's just hold out, wait this out and see what happens. And those are two separate, directions of leadership, of course. But I would imagine you're right in some extent. Companies should be moving on some of these things that are going to really make it more efficient and not waiting.
Absolutely. And like you said, some get very paralyzed. And
Yeah.
what they do, the analogy I always give is, the companies, they're going through challenging times right now. They pull back on their marketing, they pull back on their tech initiatives, they pull back in trying to, and what they're doing is they're now trying to survive instead of move things forward. And you might as well tie an anchor to
It's
the
like
bottom of your foot. All
self-sabotage.
you're going to
Yeah.
do is go down faster.
Yeah.
So they have to look for solutions. And what you will see is companies that handle these challenges well will gain significant market share and customer loyalty in these most challenging times. And so when the market picks up, whether that's in 2 months, whether that's in 6 months, a year, I don't have a crystal ball. Those are the companies that are going to have a hockey stick growth curve because they had strategic leadership right now that really embraced what was going on. And we talked about a lot of back end tools. There's a lot of front end tools now that I think become very critical. And as we talk about lead gen and everything like that, there's a lot of outdated lead management or CRM solutions in the mortgage space. Well, being able to communicate with somebody on multi channels, text, call-less voice, email, social media, all of those different platforms, a company like an Incinerate is
Yep.
doing some amazing things, putting all of that power in their application to mobile and being able to get out there and get their story told, or a sales boomerang or a monster leads. These are companies that, a sales boomerang helps identify people in your current pipeline, or I should say your current database, that either have equity in their home and could refi now and get at lower rates and lower their monthly payments, which are
Yeah.
critical for people that are struggling with their job and everything. So there's a lot of powerful tools out there, not just for the efficiencies on the back end, but on the front end of really doing some amazing things.
Yeah, yeah, that is awesome. Before we get into the front end, tell me a little bit about NexLevel Advisors. It looks like you started NexLevel Advisors around 2008, which was pretty tenuous times back then too.
Yes. So Next Level was formed. I was the former CEO of Mortgage Cadence, a very large LOS system in the mortgage industry, owned by Accenture. They do some great things in the industry. And at that time, mortgage meltdowns started taking place, right?
Yeah,
And everyone thought I was crazy for starting a company. But what I found was it was actually perfect timing, because what I found is people needed executive level strategy and insight, especially as it relates to marketing, sales, PR, communication, but they didn't have the budgets to pay for a C-level executive. So if I can come up with a model that says I don't need to get rich off of any one company, but if I can work with a multitude of companies and they benefit from somebody who has been through all of these challenges, who has led the charge and can give them that executive level insight at a very low, relatively speaking, price point for them, we've created a win-win. And so that's what we did over 12 years ago in the current marketplace. We say, at Next Level, we move audiences, we generate leads, we drive sales, and we ignite brand stories.
yeah.
That's kind of what we do, whether it's through marketing, sales, PR, social media. We're here to help, and we provide a lot of strategy, not just executing on the tools.
Yeah, I like that. When I came across it, I like that statement, move audiences.
Thank you. Well, it's important, right?
Yeah,
Because in today's day and age, especially, even prior to the coronavirus, but if you look now at what's going on with the coronavirus, engaging digital experiences are critical.
Yeah.
And so to move an audience, you've got to influence them. If you get on social media today, if you get on LinkedIn today and give somebody a hard sales pitch right after I connect it, I want to delete that follower. That's
Yeah.
not what the platforms are made for. So you've got to provide that thought leadership. You've got to move people to, hey, these people really care. There's a 3 quick little step communication process that we've been helping our clients with, dealing with the current market conditions. And I say the first step is you need to be genuine and you need to show concern. Right? People are dealing with it in all different pockets of the country, some much worse than other areas, but everyone is dealing with the challenge and they're impacted. So if you just give somebody a hard sales pitch, if you're just sending them and blasting all kinds of marketing material, you don't show any empathy, any genuine concern, it's going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
Once you do that, the second step is you got to get to the point. What value or what challenge or problem are you addressing? And more importantly, what's the value you bring to that? People don't have time. They're getting bombarded and inundated with DMs on LinkedIn. They're getting bombarded with emails. How many invites have you gotten over the last week or two to join webinars and everything else? So you've got to get to the point, and it can't be this theoretical, hey, we think in the next year or two we could really improve your ROI. You got to get to the point right now. We can help you with property valuations because we can deliver drive-by appraisals. Boom, here's how we do it. We can get you up and running because we fit in your tech stack. If you can articulate that very quickly and show them because you showed that you cared and that you have something of immediate value, you're going to have much better success. And then you need to map out what are the next steps or what's the call to action. If you can follow those 3 quick steps, people are going to be in a much better position.
Who are you usually? Who's your client? Basically, not specifically, but who is is it a B2B SaaS platform type, or is it
A lot of
the mortgage
B2B
company?
clients. I mean, we work with really anyone in financial services, really our niche. Primarily, though, we work with the tech providers, the SaaS providers, especially because I've been on that side of the fence for so long of my career, running LOS companies, being the CEO and everything. I know what they're going through. So that's a lot of our client base. Anyone selling into a lender, into a bank, into a credit union, that's really our wheelhouse. But we help a lot of lenders also.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, with regards to, and let's just actually stay on this, on NexLevel Advisors for a moment. You obviously have a podcast as well. Tell me a little bit about that. Did you just get that started? Tell me about what you're focusing on with the podcast and
So
that
we
sort of thing.
started it in October. It's called FinTech Hunting.
Yep.
And really, the whole goal of it is to add value to the industry.
Yeah.
The model is how can we share valuable information? We probably have a ratio of 2 to 1, 2 lenders to every 1 vendor that's on.
Yeah.
Because, right, even if we serve vendors and that's our wheelhouse, what they're most excited about is what are lenders talking about? What do lenders need? How are their buying decisions made? So the podcast is released every Wednesday. It's on all the major all the major podcasting platforms, Spotify, Google, Apple, Breaker, all of those. We post it every Wednesday, and we really just try to give a voice to people. I think it's very helpful if a vendor can hear, not just from me, but if they can hear from other lenders saying, here's how we make a buying decision.
Yep.
Here's how we view technology, because I think so many times a lot of vendors can get tunnel vision and think, well, I've got the greatest product, or everyone is viewing this aspect of the business a certain way. And when they hear a lender say, well, that provides no value to me at all, or this little thing that they were minimizing provides great value, it's very important. Just like the example I gave earlier, if it's got to fit in their tech stack or don't waste their time,
Yep.
that directly came from a number of interviews on the podcast.
Yeah. No, that's great. I listened to a number of them. I think they're excellent. So with your finger sort of on the pulse of fintech, let me ask you the real basic general question of where, you see mortgage tech sort of going, and maybe even where it's been in the last 5 years and kind of where it is today and where is it going. Kind of give me a synopsis of what the state of the fintech industry is.
Okay. So
Mhm.
historically, mortgage technology, fintech has been a laggard. They're not the innovator, they're not the
Yeah.
early adopter.
Mhm.
I could take articles from 10 years ago that talked about the e-mortgage,
Yeah.
and I could replace the term today with digital,
Yeah.
and almost that entire article would still work. Where I see it shifting over the last few years, you saw a lot come in probably 3, 4 years ago with the point of sale.
Yeah.
And why was that? The CFPB came in. They were now starting to push requirements. You have to give a better borrower experience. Borrowers started demanding a different experience. And so, where I see fintech changing is from what the borrowers expect, right? So, you can call it the Amazon effect, you can call it the Zillow effect, but there's a lot of talk now of what impact will those companies have. Well, first of all, what they've done is they've changed and they've conditioned buyer behavior, right? I can go to my local bookstore and I can get in the car and I can drive and I have to find parking and then I can walk in and maybe they have the book, maybe they don't. Or I can jump on Amazon and I can get the book later today or tomorrow. And I didn't have to leave my house and they delivered it right to my door. As consumers get more and more conditioned with that, it's now pushing fintech and people saying we've got to reevaluate. That's why the point of sales were kind of the first big shift. The second shift is really now people looking at the back end, because what they found is we can deliver a great borrower experience at the point of sale. People can get all excited. There's been tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars invested into that side of the business. But if it still takes 40 days, 50 days, 60 days to close on my loan, you didn't give me a great borrower experience.
Yeah.
It was great initially when I logged on to that cool, pretty website with a great GUI and a great interface. But if then there was no communication, if I couldn't get the information that I needed, if I didn't have status updates, if it took me, 20, 30, 40 days in underwriting, then I didn't have a great experience. So I think with the Zillow effect, with the Amazon effect, and that conditioned buyer, it's now challenging all of these lenders to say we have to rethink technology. We have
Mhm.
to look at ways to how do we streamline. And then I think the other thing that added to that was the cost to originate a loan. There's a lot of talk whether it's $7,500, $8,500 per loan, and that continues to rise. As that continues to rise, profit margins are razor thin. So people and lenders have to look at technology to say, hey, how can I cut out manual steps? How can I cut out redundant steps? How can I streamline things to make it a better experience all the way across the board? So hopefully that kind of
Yeah.
answered kind of a quick
No.
thumbnail sketch of where fintech is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I had a conversation, it was actually a couple months ago with a large mortgage lender, and they had in mortgage, one thing that you see and I see, not having to be necessarily be in it, is the cycles, right? And it's
Yep.
always sort of a change, always changing to catch up and reacting to where the rates are. Whether are we focusing on refinance, are we focusing on purchase? The processes that are always changing. And this guy was like, no, we are able to sort of flatten the swell or the ebb and flow of these changes, because we've automated and we've done implemented things that allow us to not have to cut staff and not allow us to have to add a bunch of staff when volume increases. And so that thing that makes us all insane in the mortgage industry of the cycles are able to be sort of leveled out a little bit with tech.
Well, and I think part of that has to change the mindset. So the people that have done that very effectively have realized that I need to look at this borrower as a borrower for life, because there's a lot of statistics that show most borrowers are going to get anywhere from 7 to 11 loans over the course of their life. The problem historically with the mortgage industry is they're very transaction focused.
Yeah.
Did I get Mike's loan today? Okay,
Yep.
we closed Mike's loan. Now where's Mary's loan? Where's Sue's loans? Where's Jim's loan? And they're very transaction focused. And when you're transaction focused, all you're doing is jumping from one transaction to another. And then when rates change, things spike, they ebb and flow, and you're on that constant roller coaster. Clients that have embraced really developing a relationship with that borrower for life and realizing that there could be 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 transactions with them and with the people that they refer, they can build in systems that will allow them constant communication with them, right? How many times have you closed on a loan, they sold your loan off, and you never heard from any of those people ever again?
Right.
And then if you go to
Every
get a
time.
loan, you don't even know who your loan officer was, and you can't even really remember the company that had it. You just remember the company that's servicing it. So I kind of consider it's this new battle for the borrower. And there's great technology that is training loan officers how to better, tune into what's going on in the market. CRM, engagement platforms that are allowing to do it, those type of systems that allow for the constant communication and interaction with these borrowers are very, very powerful. But the technology is only as good as the mindset from the company
Hmm.
of whether they view it as a transaction and just keep getting more transactions, or as, hey, this is a borrower for life, and how do I continue to work with them?
Yeah. It's interesting because along with all these things, and you sort of touched on a little bit when you mentioned Accelerate and having a LMS that allows for multiple channel communications. But how is all this tech sort of affecting the traditional loan officer team or sales team that mortgage companies are trying to build? I mean, are things, expectations changing from a sales team development point of view?
Great question. So there's a lot of ways to kind of chunk down that one little question. So I'll try
Yeah.
to do my best.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does it impact a loan officer? The knee-jerk reaction, the 30,000-foot view is, oh my gosh, is this new technology can come in and take the job of LOs?
Not going to happen.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
You're still going to need the personal interaction. It's still one of people's biggest investments that they're ever going to make. If done correctly, it's going to enhance the LO. And instead of the technology bogging down the loan officer, it's going to allow them to create a more genuine and authentic relationship with that potential borrower. And here's what I mean. If you have the power of your full lead management and CRM in the palm of your hand as a loan officer, and I can send out information not only on rates, but I can send out an email campaign, or I can send out a text campaign, or I can continue to communicate with them on social media so that I'm staying top of mind with them. It didn't diminish my relationship or my importance as a loan officer. What it did is enhance it, because it just gave me the tools at my fingertips to allow to do this. Some of the technology is even doing it where it's really frictionless. Like I mentioned before, a sales boomerang that can identify who's got equity, or who just pulled their credit, or who's looking for a home on the market. If that notification can get instantly sent to the borrower, or to the lender, I should say, the lender didn't have to go searching their database for it. They didn't have to research a lot of it. And now they can pick up the phone and call them. Or they can use a system like I just mentioned and trigger an email campaign. Or they can trigger a text campaign or a social campaign. So I think depending on how you're using it, there's another technology out there called Cortel. That is voice really technology for the loan officer that can integrate with CRMs, can integrate with the different lead management technology. And so it can listen to all calls, then it can train the loan officers so that they get much more effective at interacting and engaging with that prospective borrower. That's powerful. That's almost real-time information and feedback, instead of the old days of, hey, I just got this old recording and how do I do it? So there's a lot of solutions out there. I think the key is, from a lender perspective, you've got to figure out what are the technologies that are going to actually work within our system and our platforms. How do we make sure that we train and integrate those with our loan officers, and then set the expectation for the loan officers that these are very powerful tools that are going to enhance your ability to do what you need to do. They're not going
Yeah.
to replace you. Once
Yeah.
that fear goes away and the top LOs know, hey, I need these tools. I don't have time to send out 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 emails this year, or text or social media posts. And if tools can do that for me to keep my pipeline full so that I can interact and do what I do best with the borrower, it's a win-win.
Yeah. You know, along those, again, following along this theme here, with the sales dynamics and having multi-channel communication strategies, um, it's getting harder and harder to get a hold of prospects. Whether it's from lead gen or inquiries or whatever via telephone. Um, Especially if they're maybe not expecting it at a certain time and all this sort of stuff. Are you finding more and more companies using text or other messaging channels to get a
I
hold of
think
their?
the wave is coming. There's only a few
Yeah,
companies that are doing that very well. But I think what you're seeing is where lenders also struggle is not just the technology. A lot of people think either you have the technology or you don't have the technology. To me, that's only the first phase.
right.
The next two phases are probably the biggest impediments for most lenders to execute on any of these types of solutions that we talked about. And here's what I mean. Even if you have the greatest CRM and lead management tool and engagement platform out there, if you don't have the strategy for when should I reach out to Mike, should I do it by phone call? Should I do it by email? Should I do it by text? Should I do it by social media post? Well, the answer should be all the above, but you've got to know the frequency and the timing. If I call you 5 days in a row, I'm a hassle. I'm a hindrance, and you're going to say, don't ever call me again, Mike, but you're really bothering me. But if you got a social post as a reminder on Monday, on Tuesday, maybe you got an email from me, on Wednesday, you got a text communication with me, on Thursday, maybe you saw some thought leadership that was posted, and then on Friday, I picked up the phone just to touch base. If you have those touch points and those frequency and that strategy down, you're going to be much more effective. So that would be the second part of it. And then the third part, and this is one that everyone takes for granted, is most of the time lenders and specifically loan officers don't have time to actually create the content. So you can have the greatest technology platform in the world. You can now then have a great strategy, but if you don't have the content that's already created, and it's got to be compliant, right? So it's got to go through your compliance staff. You can't constantly respond to market conditions, and an LO, a lot of great LOs out there, a lot of creative people out there, but that's not their area of expertise in creating marketing materials and marketing messaging. So if you can team up and partner with technology providers that can provide all three, you're going to be significantly further ahead of the curve than saying, I bought this really cool technology, but now I've got to create all of the workflows, all of the strategy. And oh, by the way, I'm overwhelmed. We're working remotely. How am I ever going to get all the content created?
Yeah, yeah. So let's take a veer to the right a little bit and talk a little bit
Sure.
about some of these technology platforms or companies that you're working with and that may be watching, and thinking, okay, well, what's my best strategy to try to get in front of these different lenders? Is it content creation? Is it just straight outreach and cold calls? How do you guys help these tech companies get out into the marketplace and build their brand?
Great question. I think it starts with you've got to understand who the target audience is. And when I say that, a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
target audience, financial services,
everybody.
banks, and lenders, Michael.
Yeah,
And I'm like, that's not what I meant. Depending on what your technology does, you have a different entry point within that lender, right? So if you have a solution that's on settlement services, you're not calling the guy that's driving production on the front end. So you've really got to dive down and dig deep into who's the target audience, who's the entry point for what I'm trying to convey and get across, right? Then you should probably have personas for those individuals so that I know what are some of their pain points. What are some of the wins? How can I help them along their journey, their buyer's journey, to provide them the information that they need? Then you've got to look at what are the different touch points that you can use to convey your message. Because I'm a big believer that if all you do is phone calls, you're going to fail. And if all you do is emails, you're going to fail. Like we talked about, you've got to have a good frequency and sequence of, am I going to email? Am I going to call? Can I follow them on social media? And then in using those different platforms, the content and the tone is absolutely critical. right? Like we talked about earlier, if I'm on LinkedIn, which is a great B2B platform, if you're selling B2B, LinkedIn is a powerhouse if you know how to use it. But like we talked about, if I now connect with somebody and say, okay, I've got a new follower and it's with a lender that I really want to work with, and as soon as that connection happens, I now give them a hardcore sales pitch, I've lost them. So you've got to understand the distribution channels you're using and what is the best way to be effective. I had a lender that I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and they just did a post last week about this and said, are you guys getting bombarded with DMs? And I'm sick of people just giving me an unsolicited sales pitch.
Right.
So what we try to do is have a pulse of what's going on and educate our clients to say, I understand your sales team now can't attend those 20 conferences, those 30, those 50 conferences they're going to go to. They're not getting FaceTime. So the knee-jerk reaction is then you got to put pressure on them. You got to generate more leads. And then they start hammering people on the phone and through emails. But the message is a hardcore sales pitch and they lose. What you've got to do is figure out, how do I communicate with them on LinkedIn? We do a LinkedIn masterclass of really showing people how to properly tag, how to not only like and do a drive-by social media, but how do you comment and actually start actively engaging? Because what you have to do in those platforms, if you want to sell any product or services, they want to see, are you an industry expert and what value are you adding to the industry? So that, whether it's the messaging, whether it's the technology, it's the distribution, we really help formulate that strategy and what the type of content should be, right? Everyone's, we got to do webinars, and everyone's trying to do webinars or demos. Well, if you're not engaging with the people, and if they don't see that you genuinely care, if they don't see that you have something of immediate value,
Yeah.
you've lost them. And I think as tech providers, because they've been wearing multiple hats within their organization, and because they've been developing this tech for so many years, a lot of times they have blinders that they can't see. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, we were the first with this internet application. I'm like, really? I've seen that for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But they think they were the first at doing X, Y, or Z in the industry. So I think sometimes having a third party who can come in and not take over the marketing, but work alongside the marketing teams and the communication teams, it gives a different perspective. And because I have the incredible opportunity and pleasure to talk to a ton of vendors out there, a ton of lenders out there, I think we bring a unique perspective to the client base who's trying to get the latest insights of how do they best message and how do they best generate leads.
Yeah. Since we're talking about LinkedIn, I'm going to ask you just a question. Maybe you can give us a little tidbit. But
Sure.
what do you suggest? Is two? Actually, it's two questions.
Okay.
What do you suggest as that sort of one thing that people should focus? Obviously, there's a ton of things on LinkedIn to be successful, but is it being interactive with the target market that you're looking to attract, like and comment and all that sort of stuff? And then the second question is, who should be doing that? Is it the CEO? Is it the sales guy? Or is it the brand itself?
All right. Lots of questions there. So let's jump in. The most important thing, if you ask me, whether it's LinkedIn or on any social platform, the number one killer of all good intentions and everything like that is lack of consistency. So
Yeah.
you can come up with the greatest post in the world, and if you post one time a month, you're not going to get any traction. I'd
Yeah.
rather have not that one post, but consistently activity each and every day. So whether it's 10 minutes in the morning to say, I'm going to find new followers, LinkedIn's great for search. So go and search different key terms in your industry, whether it's mortgage banker, whether it's fintech, whether it's financial services, whether it's credit union, and click the people button, and you're going to see all these people. Start connecting. LinkedIn most of the time is going to hold you to about 50 invites per day. Again, but if you're doing it in your industry, people are going to start connecting. They're looking for ways to connect with people out there. Then to your point about, should you be interacting before you start giving sales pitches and everything like that? If you're going to post, you got to post something that adds value to people.
Yeah.
Not a post of buy my software, buy my solution, buy my SaaS model. Give something of value. Talk about the market conditions. Talk about how it's impacting. Talk about a new regulation with how you can allow for drive-by appraisals. That's of value. People want to know what's going on, or what does it mean with the zero interest rate environment from the Fed and the impact. And then if you are going to interact, like we said, don't do social drive-by. A person that I follow quite a bit, Chelsea Pites, does a great job. She's got a social selling podcast, and she talks about don't do a social drive-by. Just clicking like to 30 things really doesn't add any value to anybody. If you're going to click like, and then comment. And the best tip I can give you is in the comment. If you're going to comment, comment from something specifically mentioned in that post or on that video. Hey, Michael, I really enjoyed your podcast. And when you guys were talking about FinTech, how you mentioned X, Y, or Z. What
Yeah.
it shows is that you genuinely listen to them. And then also, when you're doing that, you should tag that person so that not only do they know you commented immediately, but it also then gets spread to their whole client base, their whole contact list.
Got it.
So those are some of the quick, tips that we cover kind of, in the
Yeah.
mastermind class. And then to your last question of, should it be more of the brand person? Should it be more of the executive? I'm a firm believer, especially in B2B sales, that if I see a post from the company,
Yeah.
what's the first thing you think of? If you see a post from NexLevel Advisors to you, what do you think of?
Well, it's not personal. Well, it's not, it's probably selling. It's probably promotional,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if it comes from the CEO, if it comes from the head of sales, and it says, hey, here's a great article really explaining what's taking place with the interest rates or what's taking place in the non-QM market, I'm going to be like, hey, I want to take a look at that. It's providing value. So I think it should be coming from the individuals. Some individuals don't have time to do it, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't come from their account. And to your point, it is much more personable
Yeah.
when it's coming from one individual to the other, except for the company. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a company page, and doesn't mean you can't update it and provide that content. But if you really want to gain traction and engagement on LinkedIn, I think it's much more important to do it on a personal level.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. I know I snuck in a few more questions in that, didn't I?
No problem.
But well, good. I mean, this has been a really fun conversation. We could probably talk for a lot longer. But I want people to be able to reach out to you with further questions. One, obviously, check out your podcast. But what's the best way to get a hold of you to pick your brain or learn more about Next Level services?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. They can go to our website. It's www.nexleveladvisors. There's no T in it. So it's NexLeveladvisors.com. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Michael A. Hammond on LinkedIn. Send me a DM. I'd love to talk, even if you're not trying to buy any of our products or services. I love talking about the industry. If we can add value, we all got to pull together and move not only this industry, but the whole economy forward. So if anyone wants to discuss any of the points that we talked about today or any others, I'd welcome that opportunity.
Love it. Well, thank you very much for joining, and we'll have to plan to maybe catch up in a couple months and just see how things are going in the fintech industry, and just see what's happening, how things have evolved, and how people are evolving with the times of change. So,
Absolutely. I would welcome that opportunity. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a guest today, and stay safe.
thanks, Michael.